All right, welcome everybody to the Lunch and Learn, the last Lunch and Learn of the week. Today is Thursday. My name is Matt, and I'm going to be your host today. Just in case this is your first time here, we have these Lunch and Learns Monday through Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And how this works is you can ask whatever questions you've got, and the way you can do that is you can use the Zoom raise hand feature. We will unmute you and you can ask your question and I will do my best to answer it. Otherwise, you could type out your question in the Zoom chat or in the question and answer box on Zoom, and I'll do whatever I can to answer your question on this call. With that, does anybody have any questions right off the bat? And again, you can use that Zoom raise hand feature and we'll unmute you. Just going to go ahead and give it a little time just in case you all are thinking about what you want to ask, if you have any questions. If a little bit of time passes, I have a sort of a demonstration that I'd like to do. It should be fun. I'm just going to go through it if there's no questions. But before I start that, I'm just going to give it a little bit of time. While we're waiting, I want to show off a feature of our documentation site. This is a somewhat new feature. I have shown it on another Lunch and Learn in the past. But what it is if you go to any of our documents, we'll just go to this first one, this installer hosting options. The bottom right of the these documents, you can click this suggest edit button. And what you can do is if you have an idea of something's missing or something didn't work in the documentation, it doesn't make sense, or you think there's something that should be added, you can click that button, enter in your email address, type out your suggestion, add any screenshots, and hit submit. It'll automatically populate with the document URL. This would then create a ticket for our doc team to review it and update this document with your suggestions. It does require that you have an account on our support site. And if you don't have one of those, that's very easy. You can create one by emailing support@decisions.com. I don't see any hands raised. And if you do have any questions, for those of you just joining, feel free to raise your hand if you've got a question. We'll unmute you and we can go from there.
Actually, Matt, it looks like Murray put something in the chat.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Reads, do you have an experience with using OCR to load batch images into decisions? Our use case would be an hourly job to load check images. Personally, I don't have experience with using OCR to load batch images into decisions. I have personally actually had a use case where we wasn't a batch, but we did use OCR to scan through some documents and pull out some text. It looks like you're unmuted. Do you want to elaborate on the question or
Sure.
talk through what you're looking for?
We have a sample and we're using Ninja API. So I was told that you guys had some experience, and if we told you which one we were using, you might be able to give us some help. Not you specifically, but decisions as a whole. As to if you've had any issues or problems with that. So if you put in a form and upload an image, it uploads it, it reads the check correctly. But we would be looking to do this from a directory. So say check images get loaded throughout the day, or like I said, and then every hour or so, it would go through the directory, assuming it would just be for each loop to load the images and save the information to a data store. But what I'm wondering about is performance. But if you've never done it, you wouldn't know anything about that. So
Let me ask you this. So you're talking about using Ninja API, is that right?
that's correct. I believe
That's
so.
what would do the okay.
Yes.
And the way that works, you have like an endpoint. I haven't actually used that, if you couldn't tell, but you have like an endpoint that takes in some file and then it outputs data about what it found in that.
Yes. Correct.
Do they have any endpoints that allow you to upload multiple documents at a time, or is it just the endpoint with a single file?
I didn't do it, so I don't really know. I'm just the one who usually attends these. So.
Gotcha. Well, if they had a endpoint that can support multiple, I would recommend using that because certainly, that would be a better performance. Otherwise, you can do a for each loop. Do you know about how many documents you'd be expecting? It sounds like you want to run this hourly. So how many would you think you'd get in an hour?
Let's say 20 to 30.
Okay, that doesn't sound completely overwhelming, and I think that a for each loop probably would suffice. Now that does depend a lot on how long that integration with Ninja API takes.
It didn't take very long at all. If you
Okay,
just load
so
a single image, yeah.
with that number of 20 to 30, I imagine a for each loop probably would suffice. If it did have issues, you could update your scheduled job flow to use more of a like a run flows for list step to run each one of those threads asynchronously.
Okay.
That would help with performance. My suggestion though would be to test it and build it out with a for each loop. Put in, I would say just put in 30 documents into that for each loop and see how long it takes. If that doesn't work, you can refactor the flow to use a run flows for list step to possibly, spread out that work into asynchronous threads and run it a little bit faster and possibly gain some performance that way.
Okay, that's some good ideas. That gets us started. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, no problem. Okay, we've got another question in the question and answer box. So this question is, I have a case entity. Different states have a trigger flow with a task. If the task is not worked in the assignment setup, has a task expiration set up and moves to the next state. In my case, I have the ability for the user to submit the task and send to later state for review. Mike, I see you're unmuted. Would you want to ask the question out loud?
Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Yeah, I think I asked this yesterday. I don't know if you were working on Lunch and Learn. So I have a case entity and there's different states. If it's not worked, the different states will be different notifications kind of to remind the user to go in and work that task. In there, I also have, in the case they open up a form, they can submit the form and the form moves to a later state, which is basically for like administrator to review the work and then be the final submission to complete the entire case. So so I have a task set up for those different notifications, and they have an expiration date right now. I put like 1 minute to test it out. If the case isn't worked, the task will go to those different states, sending out, first notification, second notification, third notification. But then if, I go in there as the user and, submit that case or submit that task, the task it'll move to the later state for review. But all those other states that have different notifications, those are still kicking off, and it's moving the case from that later review state back to, first notification or second notification or all those. So if that makes sense.
I think it does make sense. So the question that like you have about this, how do you keep the automated notifications going, but stop them if the user has moved to the task to a lower state?
Or yeah, like
So
yeah.
So this has to do with turning on and off notifications depending on what's going on with that case, right?
Yeah, and so like each one, like I have a trigger flow with a task. And like I said, there's an expiration date. That's the only thing that's set up on them. So yeah, after 1 minute, it'll go to the next state and kick that one off. So yeah, just if I submit the case, I would like it to stay in the review state instead of, going back and kicking off those notifications again and going back to a different state.
Okay. One thing, what I want to do to help visualize this is I'm just going to create a case really quickly and take a look at how we could do that. So I'm setting up a case entity here. Gonna let this load so I can open up that case designer. 2 states. Let me add a third just for the so I got started, state 2 and state 3. In your case, can bounce from state 3 to state 2. The root of your question though is like if you go from 3 to 2, how do you prevent a notification from getting sent out?
Well, how mine's set up, it's like it would be like state 2 is first notification, state 3 would be like second notification, and then there would be like another like a last one for like pending review. For like
so when you say state 3, like state 3 being second notification, it's to the same individual. They have to keep working that.
Yeah, it's still the same group. It's sending out a notification like, hey, this hasn't been worked or there hasn't been a decision made. So it just so it keeps going like that. But if you're in state 2 and you submit the task, it goes automatically to the review state. But the tasks I have set up is that it just keeps those trigger flows for the different notifications keep going. And so if state 3 trigger flow will start, it'll go back to state 3 instead of staying in the review state, even though the user came in at state 2 and submitted it. The task is putting it back to state 3.
Okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding correctly, like how your case is working. It sounds a little, maybe I'm understanding it wrong, but it sounds a little just atypical. But you're using these states to send out like a notification to the same user. It's like a reminder, right? So like it goes from state 2 to state 3. Nothing actually changed. It's just a means for sending like, oh hey, you haven't worked this task yet, but it runs that trigger flow.
Yeah.
What's the mechanism it's using to go from state 2 to 3 in that case?
So yeah, I have a task assignment, and that's where I have an expiration date set up.
Okay, I see. And then when that assignment expires, it goes to state 3. It just changes.
Yeah,
the state.
It'll go to a set entity state. So yeah, if they hit the complete button on that task, it goes to the review. If there's an assignment timeout out path on that task in the flow, then it that assignment timeout path goes to a set entity state for the next notification. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, now I'm tracking with you. It's
Okay.
like you're using this mechanism, like this kind of pattern, so that you can manage the notifications that get sent. in that case, is there any reason you don't use like that assignment expiration path instead of to set a new state, but just to resend a notification to that user and leave it in the same case state?
Yeah, I can. I think we were looking to set up so it automatically goes to different, kind of moves its way down. But yeah, I haven't tried that. So like, so you're saying like take off, set entity state, for the next notification. I wouldn't do that for that assignment timeout.
Yes, I'm saying like instead of going to a different state and having a trigger flow run again on that assignment timeout, instead of change the state, you could just send a notification or do whatever it is that needs to happen if someone hasn't yet worked that task, but leaving the case in the same state as it currently is.
Okay. Well, is there a way to I guess to continuously send out, if it's just maybe like a notification state, but like, the end goal is basically like every 5 days after 4 notifications. That's kind of the rule we're looking at. So that's why I had it set up in different states for the case. I was looking at first notification, after 5 days, send out the notification, it moves to the second notification, then it would move to the third notification, and then a final notification type thing. And so that's kind of how it's regulated, or that they want it built. So they would have, there's a certain number of notifications they want. And so that's just kind of how I'm set up. But if there's a better way, so I can make sure to, hey, this notification will send out every 5 days, for 4 times, however many notifications are required, type of thing.
It's just like a lot of things in decisions. There's probably many ways you could tackle that and meet the same set of requirements.
Yeah.
So let me demonstrate how one way you could do this without changing the state to a different case state. Now, of course, if you do the pattern I'm talking about here, where you leave it in the same state, maybe you want to see that it went to a different state and keep track of the state of the case, if that's how you want it to behave, and you want to use those different states in like a activity timeline to show, oh, it moved on to notification 4, then you could just leave it the way that you have it built now. Or if you're fine with it being in the same state, you could like use a comment or some other way of recording the fact that notification 2 has been sent, notification 3 has been sent, so on and so forth. Let me just show you one way you could do it in the same state.
Okay.
I'm just going to create a really quick form. Actually, I'll pick one that just exists. Because we don't really care what the form looks like, but I'm going to make it an assigned form. And you may be familiar with this already, but when you go into the assignment setup, you're using expiration date.
Yeah.
We have the warn date, late date, escalate, and expiration date. They all actually kind of do the same behavior. It's just that on a certain date, whatever you specify here, this form will exit down that path. So, actually, 1 second, I'm expecting more paths than that. But you know what happens? Sorry. Okay. It's been a while since I've used this feature. What it is these, when you use a warn date, the expiration date is a little different than warn, late, and escalate, but warn, late, and escalate each have a start flow. So what that means is when it hits the warn, like when it hits that warn date, you can have it run this flow, whatever you want to have happen in here. So what you could do is just have like a send email step or whatever you're using to send out a notification in here.
Okay.
This wouldn't change anything about the assignment. It just is going to say, at this date, I'm going to run this flow. And you can have your send email step or whatever it is you want to have happen for that notification. This won't change anything about your case or the assignment, just sends this email.
Now, is there a way to do just specific days instead of a specific date? Like if I just want to set it up for, after 5 days of the previous notification, then, the next one will kick off.
Yeah, the way you would do that is, there's not a specific feature for that on the assignment itself, but what you would do is like add days. You can use an add days step before the assignment. You could say add days from now and just say, if you want it to be 5, this first one would be the warn date. And then you'd have to have another one of these steps. You could say add 10 days. This would be the escalate
Okay.
date. I don't know if I spelled escalate right there, but and then you'd pass in those dates. So it does end up still passing in a date, but this is the way you can get like the date that is 5 days from today.
Okay. All right.
There are limitations, of course, I'm going to point out real quick. So you have warn, late, and escalate. There's only 3. You can't have like a 4th notification necessarily. But what you do is on the expiration date, it'll actually run down that path. And at that point, on that assignment timeout is where you would set the state to be like, okay, this is the last time we need to close this assignment and send it up to the, I think you said it goes to that approval state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at. So yeah.
So this is one pattern that would work. I don't know if it works for the rest of your requirements, but this one's simple because you don't have to think about what the case is doing or the assignment. It'll just do whatever that flow is set up to do.
All right. Well, hey, let me go ahead and test that out. I'll go ahead and try out the suggestion here, see if I can get that working, and then if not, I'll see you guys next week for Lunch and Learn.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, Matt. Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. I'm taking a look at the question and answer box. I don't see any hands at the moment, but I do want to make sure everybody has a chance in case they did have anything. So I'm going to stall for a little bit here. If we don't have any other questions, I may wrap this up early for today, and then we can rejoin on Monday. I did have a little bit of a, if we hadn't had any questions at the start, there was a little bit of a demo I wanted to try to do, but at this point, I think I'd like to save that for another Lunch and Learn. At this point, no other questions, no other hands. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I think that if y'all had a question, you would have asked by now. So I appreciate everybody coming out to Lunch and Learn. Before I do completely end it, I wanted to say that all of these are actually now made available on YouTube. So if you want to go and find any recording of these Lunch and Learns, you can go find them on YouTube. All you have to do is go to YouTube and search for Decisions Lunch and Learn, and you'll see a channel that has all of these uploaded there. Those can be a great reference for either if you had a question and you wanted to review what the answer was, or maybe you happen to have a question that was asked previously, you could find all of the answers there. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good rest of the Thursday, and we will see you again on Monday. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Matt.